Welcome to Ask the Expert on CW Strategies, Contingent Workforce Strategies LinkedIn group, the number one group for the industry, all things contingent, talent, workforce, and future of work. I have one of the most important foundational topics to talk about today, and I'm really excited about it because it's something that's really near and dear to my heart, and it's super near and dear to my guest's heart. I've got David Ballew from Nimble on today talking about compliance and governance. And it's a super, super important topic because we're talking about compliance all of the time. And it tends to be just a throwaway word almost now in the day-to-day operations of things, but no one's really talking about governance and the difference between governance, compliance, and strategic and tactical. And so David has years and years and years and years of experience on this very topic and in the industry. He's a global expert on compliance and governance. He is a global expert on rollouts of the largest contingent workforce programs in the world. And he's running one of the top consulting companies out there. So, David, thank you for taking the time to speak about this topic.
Thank you, Jeff. It's strange because this is a long, long time coming, quite frankly. And I know you and I have a regular cadence of chats, but I will tell you, compliance, when I shifted Nimble Global to full on compliance about um, people looked at me like, what the hell are you doing? Like, what? I'm like, this is what this industry needs. And I think, Jeff, you've got a term, marketing or something, marketing. What's the term?
Marketeering.
Yes, yes, marketeering. And I'm like, exactly. So everybody's out selling, and I use that term loosely, but everybody's out selling compliance. And it's like, well, wait a second. Can you define that for me, please? Because what I hear and what I see doesn't exactly match up most of the time. Not every time, but most of the time.
Well, it's
Crazy.
really, you're bang on. And we've seen that as the lead in anything in
Yeah.
our industry, be it a service company like an MSP, staffing firms, VMS, freelancer management systems. You see them advertising compliance as kind of the top thing on the list that they're providing as a service.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's interesting because you get below the surface sometimes, and just organizing this data is not creating compliance,
Mm.
right? And so there's a difference. But let's get back to the difference between governance and strategic and more the operational day-to-day compliance. And so what's the difference between governance and compliance?
Yeah, so let's start with compliance because that's what most people say they do. That's what most of the platforms say they do. Platforms meaning EOR, AOR, direct sourcing, VMS, roll them all in, roll that ecosystem all in together. They all talk compliance, right? Oh, we're GDPR compliant. Great, but that has nothing to do with what I'm actually talking about here today. So all well and good, but when you talk about compliance, compliance is simply following the rules. So what are the rules? Okay, yep, we follow the rules. Great, you ticked all the boxes. Isn't that wonderful? Governance is that next level down, right? Governance is about the decision making, about the outcomes. The maturity of your program is going to determine what the outcomes are when you end up in court or you end up in a situation that isn't a very good situation to be in. That's the scary part. And that's the part that, unfortunately, I think the vast majority of our industry continues, why, I don't know, but continues to bury their head in the sand. So we talk compliance, we talk compliance, we talk compliance. Oh, I've got a platform that helps me. And oh, by the way, I've got great indemnification language that protects my organization, and
Yeah.
it's not my problem. It won't be my problem. Well, I'm here to tell you it will be your problem. But they all have this self, what would be the word, like a confidence level that I've got this nailed, and the reality is very different.
Yeah, and so you mentioned take it down a level. I would argue it's take it up a level and start to think about governance at a more strategic level, which then, like you say, if you have the proper frameworks here, you then operate it here, and if something happens, you already have anticipated at a strategic level that then if that happens in the operations, we've already identified how to deal with it, right?
Yeah, so let's break into that for a minute because really what that is, that's the enterprise value, not the operational engagement value, right? So there's a difference
Yeah.
there. And what everybody's doing today, what I think what most people are touching is that tactical, that engagement level. Like, my contractors come in and they're misclassified. The contract wasn't appropriately executed or wasn't drafted appropriately. Whereas if you take a look at the enterprise, this is where the mistake touches the company as a whole, right? So I don't know, I've got 25 contractors in Germany right now and didn't even realize that they're creating this whole permanent establishment risk. So let's
Yes.
say I'm in the US and I've got a company and I've hired 5 people and I've put them through a whatever program and they're in Germany and they've created this economic activity as the government would look at it. They've created this economic activity, revenues coming in the door. And guess what? We're not talking about payroll tax exposure anymore. We're talking about corporate tax exposure. So that into the enterprise level, which is where the governance really kicks in. That's what it's all about. That's what's
Yeah, and
getting missed.
it's really interesting because we put out a poll recently around who owns it, and it was IC misclassification, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it was I the answers were finance, legal, HR, or the contingent program team. And it might be skewed a little bit because of the a lot of the audience are more in the contingent workforce program space.
Uh,
The program team won out over legal just by a nose. But I think, like I say, it's the program team that is doing the operations. When we start, if we were to reword it and who owns the governance and the bag at the end of the day, you got to take it up a level and you got to say legal.
yes, agreed. Yeah,
And the CW team tends to be the administrators of the
yeah,
policies of what has been brought down. And they may have been the initiators of creating the governance, the
yeah.
policies, but ultimately it's legal in lot of these compliance situations.
Yeah, you have to remember though when it all falls apart and you end up in court, it's going to be the regulators that are going to assess it at that structural level, right?
Yeah.
The regulators are the ones that are going to come in and you're going to say, "Oh, well, here's my contract. Great. Here's my workflow. Okay, so there's your following the rules, I guess following my workflow. I ticked all the boxes. I did everything I was supposed to do. Okay, but tell me about the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation in most cases is very different than what's been put down on paper, right? So the judge will first say, "Show me your contracts." So everybody pulls out, "Oh, I've got my MSA and I've got my supplier, my MSP services agreement. I've got my VMS agreement. Here's all your agreements. Here's my subcontract agreement. All these things come together." The
Yeah.
judge takes a look at them and says, "Okay, this is great. Now tell me what you really do."
And that's the interesting part. We talk quite a bit, and I talk to customers, and you ask them what is the logistics of this of the liability, the lawsuit that happens, right?
Yeah.
How does that work? And you mentioned earlier on around indemnification clauses, which give a false sense of security. It was the
Yes.
word I think you're trying to catch.
That was it. That's it. Yeah.
And so the false sense of security with these indemnification clauses, they're so easy to wiggle out of. And what you just said in an actual court of law, it's a human being that's sitting on the bench
Yeah.
deciding things.
Yeah.
And they will want to know and in most legislation, it says it's not what's written in contracts, it's what happens day to day, right?
And then
And a lot of the legislation has actually enhanced to actually say that very explicitly because they know there's a lot of false fronts put in contracts, right? And
correct.
so it's fascinating to help clients understand the actual logistics of how this gets sorted out, which then really will change their mind around the operational side of it. And then the governance is what you were talking about today. It really changes the mindset.
Yeah, it's I think a good analogy would be you show up for court and you're wearing your costume, you're wearing your suit, right? You're all suited and booted, and the judge asks the question, and suddenly you have to take your suit jacket off. uh-oh, that old, I've heard this in sales before. People say, oh, you peek behind the kimono or whatever
Yeah,
that's,
I often say that.
I,
Yeah.
I peek behind the curtain, so to speak. And that's where you see what's really happening. So
Yeah.
is it a legitimate compliance department, or is it five people pedaling 55,000 miles a minute to like get everything done, get rush to onboard that worker, only to find out 6 months later, oh my God, we have a problem.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah,
often even longer. 3 years
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
later, they
Oh,
have a problem, right?
it could be well after the fact and the contractor's been long gone that you end up having a problem.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's very interesting. And the liability is huge. And we're not just talking misclassification of independent contractors. That's always a nice big nugget because the headlines are huge.
sure.
It's compliance with insurance documents around personal injury issues. It's compliance with payroll laws. It's compliance with all sorts of other things. So talk to me about some of the compliance, other compliance outside of just misclassification. And because I think it'll be fascinating because you see it almost on a strategic governance level, which then hits the compliance of all sorts of parts of the
It's
program.
operations. Yeah, I think the number one that gets missed 90%, at least 80%, we'll throw the 80-20 rule at it, but it's probably way more than that, is health and safety.
Yeah.
That gets missed all the time. And it doesn't come up until somebody says, oh, we've got an injury. Oh,
Yep.
somebody just got killed, or whatever else happens. It's
Yep.
horrible, horrible, horrible thing. I could write a book on this subject alone. Horrible things have happened in the staffing industry, the MSP world, where people have died as a result of inappropriate compliance with health and safety.
Yep.
Period. Full stop. If I were an MSP, if I were an enterprise HRTA risk department, I would be looking immediately. First thing I'd go do after we end this call, I would be going and looking at my health and safety and do we have it covered? And do our partners have it covered? So this is where the complexity of our industry ecosystem really kicks in, because you've got the end client, you've got the MSP, then you have your supply chain, and God knows who's vetting the supply chain. Are they even vetted correctly? And that's probably a whole nother podcast to
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah.
that subject alone, like compliance of your PSL, your preferred supplier list. Wow. Okay, but no, let's take a step back to health and safety. Do we know, for example, Australia, the staffing vendor and the end client are both responsible and both have to do site visits
Yep.
required by law?
Yep.
Is that happening? Is every staffing firm going out to the plant facility and doing their walkthrough? Probably not in many cases. I hope many
Yep.
are, but probably aren't. So every country is different. And circling back to the getting before the judge, something else you have to think about is the jurisdictional aspect of this, right? So, for example, here in the UK, there's also a level of fairness that
Yes.
the judge takes into consideration. I think Canada is very similar to the
Yep.
UK law. So it's not just about the law; it's also about the judge will look at the case and say, well, what's fair and equitable in this particular situation?
Correct.
Because you don't necessarily have that in the US.
Yep.
So these differences of jurisdictional, when you look at global, and that's another thing, by the way. So, oh, I'm global. I'm global. Well, are you really? Help me
Yeah.
understand that. Um, and just being an account manager for an account in two countries doesn't necessarily give you the credentials to be shouting global from the top of the roof.
Yeah.
And,
It is
it's
amazing. And it's a perfect example. Health and safety is another area of compliance that we should probably touch on because that's something near and dear to my heart as well. In my People 2.0 days, we did quite a bit in the heavy
yeah.
industrial space, oil and gas. And it is true why we did so well in that space. A lot of companies don't want to get involved in actually doing it properly because it's expensive. It's expensive to do things properly, right? And
Well,
so,
yeah. Let me
yeah,
touch on that just for a second because I think both of us could talk war and peace here. It's kind of
yes,
funny. Yeah. All right. So let me go back to that, touching on that, not wanting to either take responsibility or not wanting to incur the cost. And this is something everywhere that we run up against every day. So you take a look at, and without obviously not naming any names, but even not even naming parts within our industry across the ecosystem broadly, all all
Yep.
service providers, all tech providers, because they kind of go hand in hand, right? They all kind of fall into this category of we sell compliance. They lead with compliance.
Yeah.
It's a significant part of the sales deck, if you want to call it that, the sales messaging. But at the end of the day,
They don't take
if
responsibility for compliance, though.
yes, perfect, perfect. So self-monitoring, self-auditing, and this is not a plug for what we do, but self-auditing is not compliance, and it sure isn't governance.
The old adage, having the wolf manage and
Oh
count
yeah,
how many hens are in the hen house,
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
often used in our industry, and that is problematic. And so I think, it's really interesting to get back to some of those obstacles. There's a cost. And then especially with a lot of the platforms of late that have come in to disrupt the staffing industry, and I kind of do that sarcastically, right? Because disruption is interesting and it's driving innovation, but is it doing it correctly, right? And so when it comes to compliance, it's often seen in tech terms as friction because it's interrupting getting to revenue. It's a necessary evil to get to revenue. So let's do the minimum amount to get to revenue, but really minimum amount to get the sale. It's not the minimum amount to be compliant. It's get the minimum amount to get to the sale.
Well, that's
And
the revenue
so,
model, isn't it?
what's
That,
that?
that is the revenue model. Because if a person comes in, if a worker comes into the workflow and they're evaluated, and guess what? They're not compliant, so therefore they don't move forward in the process, nobody makes any money. So the institution itself is designed, the industry, both services and tech, are designed to move people forward in the process. That's how we all make our money, we being the industry itself.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yes, you are absolutely correct.
And so, and we often also say, hey, user experience is the other side. And so
Yeah.
that friction is partially friction to revenue, but then it's also user experience, like both on the client side and the worker. Like these obstacles, how do you how do you start to overcome them? Or is there some other obstacles first, and then how do you overcome the obstacles of, oh, the user experience is at risk by having too much compliance day to day, and then the cost of compliance, right?
Yeah, well, number one, I think take a look at what you already have. Before you go buy any more platforms, before you go buy any more tech, take a look at what you have. And have you fully optimized your VMS, your FMS, the list is long. I don't need to go through it. Have you fully optimized it? In most cases, the answer is, in nearly all cases, the answer is no.
No.
So if you've got a VMS, first of all, you most likely have probably overbought on functionality because you didn't need some of what you bought. But okay, it comes with it. But so if it came with it and you're paying for it, are you using it? Because if you're not, you need to reevaluate again back to the compliance of following the rules. Um, we're not going to even go down the AI route when we're talking about decision making because that's a whole nother
Yeah.
conversation of AI risk. But and I could talk War and Peace on that too. But in this particular case, um, are you fully optimizing the tech solutions you have today? That's first, but then you've got to do a deeper dive into, okay, so VMS, whatever the tech you're looking at, and I use VMS in a broad sense
Yeah.
because most people have a VMS.
Correct. And it's
I'm
the
not,
infrastructure that
yeah,
manages the day to
yeah.
day,
I
and it
just want
and
to
it
be
sells you
clear.
compliance, right? It
Yeah,
tells
I'm not,
you're
I'm
gonna.
not calling out VMS as a problem.
Yeah.
I'm just using that as the example. So, um, well, have you fully optimized? And then also, what are they doing? You need to dig deep into them to say, hey, help us understand when it comes to not the compliance aspect of what we've been sold, but help us understand the governance behind it in the system. Is it there? How are the decisions, first, how are decisions made? And then how are they documented? And are they auditable? Because if
Yeah.
we can't do all three of those things, then we have a real serious problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, serious problem. And I think for terms of the people listening to this, always remember, always remember, you should constantly be building your defense file.
Yes. And
Always.
that's the end result is a lawsuit.
Yes.
So and this is getting back to the strategy of this. and the
Yeah.
governance, right? So I think, and then thinking, yeah, I love your idea of, hey, let's anticipate a lawsuit and then work it back, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the
It's
defense file is definitely, especially in all of the compliance realms, be it health and safety, be it wherever the risk potentially lies, you need to build those defense files. And
you do.
obviously, I know what that is, given we do IC compliance and classification as a service at
Yeah.
independently, right?
Yeah.
As an automated solution around that. And so building the defense file is often just overlooked. Like, and it's 1099 season, right? In the US. So finance over here just reported to the government. There are thousands of vendors that they paid on a 1099.
Yeah. Yeah.
Finance never asks, where's the file that you have to defend that? Should they? Yeah, they should. Before they send in a 1099 form, they should say, where's the file and is it complete before I send this to the government? Because what did they just do? They just informed the government they have an independent contractor, right,
Yeah.
on their books.
Self-reporting. Yeah, self-reporting. You're raising the red flag that, hey, come look at me. I've got this. Yeah, it's a bit mind-boggling actually when I really stop and think, right? Because my mind goes a million miles a minute. When I actually stop and think about the risk associated to what we're talking about, it's yeah, it's significant.
And
I
so
think what
taking that end result and then bringing it back and building it into your operations, so you're doing it, and you're watching out for the user experience, but you're building it into the operations, and then the governance is watching the operations. So that's an interesting thing too. So if governance is more the strategic design solutioning level, and then the monitoring level, how do you monitor compliance? Like, and I know we've talked about this in other conversations, but let's talk about it here. Like, what are some best practices in monitoring the compliance?
yeah, you first off you need to look at how the decisions are made.
Yeah.
And this unfortunately in our industry is probably the biggest challenge because there are so many levels and so many different things that touch it, whether it's a service or a tech provider that touches that decision making process. So to 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 say, and this is kind of ironic when you think about it, because probably for the last 5 or more years, most of the tech providers in the industry have said, "Oh, we're AI enabled, we're AI enabled," and that was all the rage. We're AI enabled. What that means different things to different people, but we're AI enabled, and maybe that means candidate ranking. How do they fit to the position and all that jazz. Yeah, we're AI enabled, but now because governments and regulations, regulatory boards are coming up, governance is becoming a legal aspect. Suddenly you have to defend how you came to the decision that this person it meets the requirements at 89%.
Yeah.
How did you get to that decision? And if you ask most of the service providers out there, they're not able to explain that. So then they have to go to the next level, which is their tech partner. You ask the tech partner, can you help us? This is the governance. Can you help us understand how the decision was made by your technology, which is AI enabled?
And then that
Most,
goes into a paradox lawsuit, right? And
there we
then
go.
follow-on lawsuits of all of Workday's clients that used
Yeah,
paradox. Yeah.
there you go. So what the bigger risk here is isn't just the individual contractor. All you need is, depending on where you are in the world, again, back to jurisdiction and how litigious are they? US, and I know this for a fact because we pay really high insurance rates in the US for what we do. For this particular reason, so many lawsuits are coming in constantly. Now, all you need is one attorney to say, I see a class action here. I like this. This is great for me. Thank you very much.
I often call them, David, ambulance chasing
Yeah, yeah,
employment lawyers, which you used to see side of the highway in the US, lawyers for personal injury. Were
yeah,
you in an auto accident, etc. Now you're starting to see them saying, were you paid for every hour that you worked, right?
yeah, yeah.
And so it's very interesting how litigious and they see the opportunity, they'll take it, right? And so
They will.
companies have to be aware of that. And it's not bury your head in the sand and hide behind your indemnification clause as a best practice. Because for the most part, like we've talked about earlier, here's the contract, and then the judge says, what happened?
Yeah.
And there's two different things, right?
There's another factor here too. Sorry. There's another factor here that is we have an educated workforce.
Mhm.
Now, historically, especially COVID and now working remotely has really impacted the world in this particular compliance governance also because historically people were employees and you had an HR department that
Yep.
that we all know the reality of the situation. An HR department isn't necessarily there for the workers, they're there for the corporate protection of the company, right?
Correct.
So, and they do a great job at that. That's their role. That's what they do. But now with the freelancer world and people working remotely and even if they are an employee and they're working remotely, that also introduces a whole nother set of another conversation for another day, a whole nother set of things that need to be addressed risk wise. But if we circle back to an educated workforce, I mean, go on TikTok. Go on TikTok.
Yep.
There are HR people talking TikTok, and I'm talking against HR people,
Yeah.
consultants talking, here's what you need to ask your HR manager to protect yourself in this particular type of situation.
There's a
So that's
lot
the
more
real work.
information out there and a
A
lot more
lot more.
education. And
Yeah.
so, and I always say, like, coming from the IC world, the number one trigger of misclassification lawsuit is the worker themselves.
Yeah. That's
They
right.
are educated, they feel disgruntled for some reason, severance, termination. They see the opportunity to financially benefit themselves often, and they're told about that via TikTok and other means, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and they say, well, okay, yeah, I'm acting like an employee, so maybe I should get those
Benefits or
benefits and all
whatever.
those
Yeah.
types of things. And so
Yeah.
then they go get a lawyer, and then it all starts, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's really interesting that the idea of having a governance layer to watch this, the tactical layer actually doing it day to day, and then the governance layer helping monitor the tactical. Are they actually doing what they said they were going to do? So that we have complete defense files for whatever area of risk that we're within, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, yeah, it's fascinating this conversation how we've went throughout and then just kind of summarize some of this stuff, right? So,
Yeah.
we're getting to the end of our time, David, and I hate that we're getting to the end of our time because I think we could probably talk for another hour or 2 hours. It's always awesome. Every conversation I've had with you is an Ask the Expert. So we'll have to do this again. But I always end things off with, hey, I'm a program manager running a contingent program, thinking about compliance and governance now that I'm educated that we need more governance of our compliance. What are some of the like best next steps I can take? Like I got to start somewhere. So what is those next stepping stones to move me towards some more success in this area?
Simple. First off, let me just say this right out the gate because I see compliance is not about choosing the right platform.
Yeah.
It's all about having the right control system in place.
Yes.
So that being the case, that's the foundation to everything we're talking about. So that being the case, we then want to, first off, first thing I would do if I was in that seat, I would go to my partners, my tech partners, and I would ask, help me understand not just your compliance that you've sold to us, but help me understand the governance behind your compliance. And then stop there. So it's very similar to I have an amazing HR person that has been in my life for many, many years. And she's brilliant. And she taught me one thing. She said, stop talking. Ask the question and stop talking. And that pregnant pause is worth more than you will ever know.
Yeah.
So ask the question. Tell me about the compliance, which is what we bought, which is what we were sold. And now tell me about the governance behind that compliance.
Yep.
And then stop talking. That's the first thing I think you need to do. Once you get a grasp or a really good understanding of what the reality of that situation is, you will then, your legal will then, whether it's external or internal, doesn't matter. A good legal will take a look at that and they will say, from a defense file perspective, this is good. Or it's the complete opposite in most cases. Oh my God, do we have a problem?
Yeah, because you're naked, right? You're naked
Yes.
going
So
into
then
that
what do
potential
we,
lawsuit.
yeah. Yeah, so then what do we do to fix the problem? And this is actually a good thing. I think I don't think, I know the industry needs this. The industry
Right.
needs to be looking at this granular level. You need to get into the weeds. They need to take a look at it and they need to make a decision of whether or not they are going to do this or not do this. And if they choose not to do this, that's fine. That's their business. In fact, many don't do this today.
Correct. Yeah.
So for whatever reason, I'm sure they have reasons, but for whatever reason, they haven't done it. And they still don't do it. Even though they're aware, they still don't do it. There will be people who watch this conversation and still will not take action,
Correct.
you know.
David, I can't thank you enough. We've had lots of conversations
You
over the years, and finally we're putting it down into an Ask the Expert podcast. And I appreciate your time. And I know we should be doing another one, especially on some of the actual getting deeper dives in some of the actual risk areas. It's fascinating and it's educational for the audience. So I can't thank you enough for joining me today.
well, thanks for the platform. And one last comment. You guys have this is what brought me really to you guys, your insured indemnification.
Yep.
I don't know anyone else who has that, quite frankly, but yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you. Talk soon.
All right, take care.